Hey guys, so Raymond here again, talking about Filipino martial arts, coaching, and Filipino culture in general. Alright, so I want to get started with something very general. Okay, I don't want to get into techniques yet, maybe we'll do that for a future episode. But what I want to talk about today is sources of information for martial arts in general. And the reason why I want to talk about this is it really helps put Arnis or Filipino martial arts within the context of the greater sphere of martial arts. Okay, because I've had a lot of experiences with other martial arts and practitioners from other martial arts, and there's always this whole thing sometimes that when you talk to them, you have this feeling that you're not all coming from the same direction or from the same route. So this video is an effort to make it a little bit more accessible to everyone, or at least a little bit understandable. Now, when I talk about sources of information for martial arts, here I'm talking about two major things. On the one hand, um, you have a living tradition, all right? That's probably the most basic one for us. And what do I mean by a living tradition? Basically, a living tradition is when you are taught the martial art by someone that you know, or someone alive who would actually physically or directly teach you. Alright, so this covers everything, even if it's just your dad teaching you how to punch, or how to fight, or little tips and strategies on how to fight. This is called a living tradition. Alright? And on the opposite end, on the other side, what you do have is documented documentation, or maybe a non-personal way of teaching martial arts. What does this mean? The most common example, of course, is training manuals. If you've been training in martial arts for any amount of time, really, that's what you get a lot of. You see a lot of manuals out there. I mean, just about every other successful MMA competitor has come out with a book or maybe even a video documenting how he fights, his strategies, what to do in specific situations. Alright, so you have these two spectrums, or two ends of the spectrum sometimes, where you have a living tradition, and then you also have documented techniques. Now, okay, maybe calling it a spectrum is a mistake, but these are two things that are very separate. Alright, now, when it comes to living tradition, this is very strong in Filipino martial arts. We have a strong living tradition. The fighting arts here have been passed down quite a while. Um, this is very interesting. So the knife fighting techniques, the punching techniques, the stick fighting techniques especially, they have been passed down from generation to generation quite directly from a teacher or mentor-student kind of relationship. On the other hand, you have, but, okay, I must add that Filipino martial arts is very weak when it comes to documented techniques or documented way of teaching Filipino martial arts. We were not really big on making manuals. We were not very big on creating books to talk about Filipino martial arts, how we fight. I mean, right now some guys on Facebook are doing a great effort on translating Spanish accounts of how we fought in the Philippines years ago. So again, Filipino martial arts is very weak in that. And I'll talk a little bit about the implications of having that weakness. On the other end of the spectrum, you also have HEMA, or Historical European Martial Arts, where they don't really have, okay, this is debatable, okay, some guys are going to be up in arms about it, but by and large, a lot of HEMA practitioners, their primary source of learning historical European martial arts is documented, manuals and books. There's nothing wrong with that, honestly. And again, I'll be talking about the pros and cons later. But yeah, that's their main source. Some say that they do have a living tradition, and there are some guys who claim to have a living tradition. I don't know. I haven't done any research on how accurate that is. But hey, by and large, manuals. Okay, and that has its own pros and cons. Now, in the middle of all of this is, of course, Eastern Asian martial arts, which is Japanese and Chinese. Although I have very little experience with the Chinese martial arts, I know more people in Japanese martial arts. But anyway, in the middle you have Japanese martial arts, which have the best of both worlds. They do have a living tradition, and they do have documented like manuals and books on how they used to fight. Okay, now having the best of both worlds, does that mean that ooh, the Japanese are the best already when it comes to transmitting information? Again, pros and cons, and I'll be talking about that in a future video. Now, why is it important for me to bring out this groundwork? Well, it's really important when you talk to people about martial arts to know where they're coming from. You know, like for example, and this is gonna be a quick example, like if somebody comes from a traditional Chinese background and you're a Filipino martial arts from a Filipino martial arts background, I do know that some Filipino martial arts guys have this kind of what do you call it? Have this like the chip on their shoulder because we don't have all of these documented manuals from 300 years ago, 400 years ago, whatever. You know, and the solution for some guys is to invent. Honestly, there are guys who would invent really dubious claims about how, ooh, we have these manuals since forever. And we'll talk about that when I go in deeper about it. But you know, if you're from the Filipino martial arts, you have to accept it. You know, we don't really we're a culture who can read. The literacy rate is pretty high, but we're not big fans of reading and writing as a rule. Very few people have it as a hobby. All right, so just live up to it, you know. And I'll be talking in the next video. I'll be talking about the pros and cons of this. All right, guys. So thanks for listening. It was a bit long, but hopefully it was a bit helpful for you. Have a good day.